Hey everybody, today we are in Unreal and we're going to be looking at how to build a data-driven system in Unreal with a CSV file. And why would you want to do this? Well, you can create someone on your team could update your Unreal Motion graphics using just, say, a spreadsheet or something like that, maybe lower thirds, product variations. As they say, the possibilities are endless. There are several methods you could accomplish this with, whether it be CSV, JSON. In this tutorial, we'll be using a CSV file. I thought before we dive into the deep end on all of this, we'll first try to build a very simple lower third using this technique. So that is exactly what we'll be covering in this video. All right, just an overview here. We're going to start with creating the struct. The struct defines the shape of your data, what columns exist. Next, we'll create a very simple external CSV file. I have to be careful with that one. And we'll import that file into Unreal as a data table. Next, we'll create a widget blueprint that will act as our lower third graphic. And then we'll create an actor blueprint, which that's where we'll essentially code this thing. And finally, we'll see if it works. Hopefully it will. So let's jump in. Right now, I have just a basic level. And the first thing we should do, and you'll see why in a moment, is to create our struct. To do this, right-click in the content browser, and that's going to fly off of my screen here. So I'm going to have to use the search bar up here. But where you would want to go is under Blueprint and drag down here and choose Structure. I'll just type in Blueprint, and then you'll see the flyout menu better. And we'll come down here and choose Structure. Next, we'll need to name this, and let's use the proper naming convention. We'll say ST underscore, and you can name it anything you want. Just going to call mine lower third L5. And let's double click on it to open it. So over here, here's where we enter our variables. And so this is just a simple name super. So the first variable, as you might have guessed, is going to be name. And we need to set that variable to a type, and I'm going to choose string. Now we'll add a second variable here, and this person is going to have a title. And once again, we'll set that to string. We'll save, and that's all we need for this struct. So we can close that. Okay, next we'll need a spreadsheet, and I created mine just using Google. So I'm going to start in this first cell, and we're going to call this row name. And next we need to, under this row, we'll add the name and title. Under row name, you can name these whatever you want, by the way. I'm just going to use entry 1. For the name, we'll type in John Smith. You can type in your name. You can have fun with it. Name your favorite celebrity, whatever you want to do. Okay, and we'll call him a senior reporter. Next, we'll need to import this CSV file into Unreal, but first, I need to download it from Google. So I am going to just name this lower third L5. Let's download it as a CSV file. And let's take our lower third, our CSV file, and simply drag it into the content browser window. Now, when I let go, you're going to see it's going to ask you a question. And this is why we created that struct earlier. So it says choose data table row type. Now we want to click on this. And in my case, I need to choose the ST lower third L5. And we'll click apply. So it's created our data table for us. Okay, doing great. Now we have to create our blueprint widget. In case you don't know, a blueprint widget is used to create and script user interface elements such as HUDs, menus, or interactive on-screen displays, and so on. To create one of these, we'll need to click in our content browser once again using the flyout menu, and I'll probably have to search this. And we would want to drag down to where it says user interface. So I'll just use the search and say user interface, user flyout, and we want to select widget blueprint. Select widget blueprint from the pop-up, and there we go. And we'll name this again using the proper name convention, WBP for widget blueprint underscore lower third. I like to call mine L5 just to keep everything. Yeah, in case you're wondering, I'm adding L5 to some of my file names here just because I called this level here L5. So if you just want to call it lower third, that will work too. So let's open that. Let's open that up. In the Palette tab, let's do a search for Canvas panel. We need a Canvas panel, and let's drag that grid over here. This next one is optional. I usually use it. I'm gonna add a vertex box, I believe. Yes, vertex box. We want to add that to our Canvas panel, and I'm just going to drag out this vertex box to kind of take over this entire area here. Next, we need our actual text box. So come over here and under common, let's scroll down, let's grab a text, and we could just drag it right into our vertical box right here. And we're going to need two of these. So let's go ahead and drag another one right under that first text box right there. And let's give these a name. We'll be using this later. And I'm going to call the first one TB underscore name. And the second one is going to be called, we'll come up here again. We're going to go up here to our details panel and we'll call it TB underscore title. And this is very important. I'm going to come back to the TB underscore name. And what you want to do again up here in the details panel where it says is variable, go ahead and check that for both of these. That will expose this variable so we can address it later on. And one last thing, if you want to, you can come over here, we'll say name and title. So that'll keep that straight for us. Again, I'll compile and save. Okay, let's start creating our event graph. And to do that, or our blueprint, sorry. And to do that, let's come over here. I'm going to right click in here and we are going to select a blueprint class, actor blueprint, and we'll call this BP, you guessed it, lower third. And I'm going to name mine L5. Once again, just keep everything straight. Now, let's go ahead and open this. All right, to get started, let's create a couple of variables. I'm going to speed through this a bit. For our first variable, I need a reference to our data table that we created. In the Variables tab, click the plus button to add a variable, and I'll name mine lower third table. Next, let's set the type from Boolean to data table. Now grab an object reference for that. We'll need to compile and save. And in the Details panel, come down to the default value and find the data table you created earlier. Next, let's create another variable to hold our widget blueprint, the one we want to display in the viewport. I'll name it lower third widget. And to set its data type, I'll search for my lower third widget blueprint. And let's get an object reference to that. Next, compile and save. We'll come back over to the details panel with the variable selected. Come down to default value, and we'll search and select our WBP lower third widget. Now we're ready to jump in to our event graph right over here. Let's drag off the event begin play and search for create widget. And that's what we want. For the class, select your WBP lower third widget. And next, I'm just going to come over here to our lower third widget, drop this in, and select set lower third widget. There, that will work too. So, your preference. Now, we need to add all of this to our viewport. And how do we do that? Well, pretty simple. We'll drag off the set and we'll type in add to viewport. Now we need to address this data table right here and get the data out of there and tell it where to go, which fields to go to. All right, so how do we do that? To do that, we will use a get data table row. And you should see it right there. And we'll click on that. So where's our data table? Right here. So let's drag this off of here and get data table. And let's connect this up into the data table right there. Now there's one more input we have to worry about, and that is the row name. I named my first row entry 1. So whatever you named your first row in your spreadsheet, be sure to enter it right there. For the out row over here, this contains our name and title data, but we need to break this up before we can really use it. Let's drag out of this pin and search for break. So ST lower third L5. I think you can see it now. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now, look here, we have our name and title. Getting close. First, though, we need a reference for our lower third widget again. We're going to drag that in, and we just need to get it. And remember what we called our first text box here was TB underscore name. So that's the first thing we need to search for. We're going to search for TB underscore name, and there it is. So let's drag off and search for set text. The one you want is right here under content. So we'll choose this node here, set text, and that will be feeding into our target node. And the first thing we want to come up, of course, is the name. So we want to feed the name into that text node. Now, let's repeat this process for the title. So we'll come over here. And once again, we'll do TB underscore title. We'll get that right there. And I'm going to drag off of here once again. And we're going to say set. I'm going to drag our title into that text there. All right, so this getting a little bit like spaghetti code here. We can go back in and fix that later, but I'm going to connect these two. All right, so before we can move on, we need to go back. We need to go back to our get data table row node. Let's drag out and let's search for a branch. It's a tiny bit of overkill for this example, but probably good practice to do that. I'll connect this branch to our set nodes, and we'll compile and save. And we're ready. I think. Hopefully we got everything hooked up properly, and this will work. And this is probably the most important step. Make sure you drag and drop your BP lower third actor into the level. Otherwise, it will not work. All right. I'm going to save all of that. We'll come up here, hit the play button, and there we go. I don't know if you can see that, but it says John Smith, Senior Reporter. Now, if we wanted to, we could come back in here. We could play with the formatting on this. In other words, we could increase the font size, maybe make it a different color, and click OK. We'll click our title here. Again, we'll increase the font size a bit. And I don't know, we'll leave it the same color. Hit compile and save. Now let's run it again. And there you go. So you have a great control over your formatting, and we can go into that in more detail in later videos. All right, thanks guys, and give that a try and hope that works for you. We'll see you in the next video.